And when we get to the other side of the hell that is processing a really big breakup, when we get to the other side, what we are left with is, clarity. I see what I did. This was my pattern. I see what they did. I'm determined to not let that happen again. I can't control my future, in terms, I can't control another person, but I can really do my best to see that whatever just happened in this past relationship that made the first year great and then it totally turned sour, I'm determined to not repeat that pattern again.
I used to be for a very brief moment, a musical theater composer. And we used to use this word, en media res, in the middle of the action. So here we are in the middle of the action. Jillian, thank you for being here. Welcome to Been There, Felt That.
Thank you for having me.
You're an early guest in the in the pod. And so I'm very excited, and I'm very excited because I'm going to be totally honest. I didn't know about you 1 year ago. Okay. I didn't know who you were. And in this last year of my life, all I hear about is you. And I realize that you have been working for many, many years, but whatever's happening in consciousness, in the world, in the space, your voice has become a voice that I have heard so many people reference in the last year of my awareness. And so I'm very excited to chat with you today. Before we even get started, because we're a podcast about feelings, how are you? What are you feeling right now?
I'm actually feeling good right now. That could change in an hour.
That's the thing. Goes.
That's really the thing about feelings. They really do just come and go. And it can change from hour to hour, right? So totally. Right now I'm feeling good. In a couple of hours, I could be feeling anxious. Who knows? But right now, at this very moment, I'm in a pretty solid state. So hallelujah.
I love that. I love that. And I appreciate the honesty of the fluidity of feelings. I think that is super important for people to understand that, they could be great and 1 second later be shitty, and they should not beat themselves up for that. You have such a, one of the things before we started recording, I was talking about your podcast and quoting a line that you may or may not have actually said or written, which we'll get to. But before that, what I love about you and your work is how much of a focus there is on self. You think about somebody who helps people with relationships and you think like, oh, great. Like they're going to help me figure out how to, do all these external things. And I love that so much of your work originates with like, you got to get you right. And as a jumping off point, I'd love to know how your work became so focused on that idea.
When I was going through a divorce, kind of like the breakup that was like, would become like the breakup that would change my life. Many years ago, when I was processing that, what it occurred to me was that, and it occurred to me because I also had help coming to this realization that, nothing is actually going to change in your relationship or in your life at all if you don't take responsibility, if you're not actually accountable. This concept of it begins with us, it begins with you, it begins with me is an invitation to go down a journey of self-discovery, of trying to understand why we do certain things that we do, why we make certain decisions. what motivates us, what inspires us, what causes pain. And so I had to get very real with myself about my patterns and also about the ways in which I didn't validate certain feelings that I had, which is definitely a result of conditioning, cultural conditioning, world conditioning, family conditioning. I had to take responsibility for my choices, and I also had to take responsibility for how I showed up in a relationship so that I didn't walk around with this story, which is that somehow I'm a victim. And so that's what really started it. And my ex-husband and I, when we tried couples therapy, and the therapist who we worked with was an amazing therapist for me because I worked with her after my ex and I broke up. But as a couples therapist, part of what inspired me to start working with couples, I work with more individuals now, but in the beginning I was working a lot with couples and with families. And what inspired me was the fact that our experience in couples therapy was just not good. I mean, there was no one was holding a mirror being like, you need to look at your shit right now, to both of us. There just was none of that. There was just more about trying to help each other understand one another on a very surface level. And I recently interviewed a couple who I'd worked with a while back. And they've been together a very long time. They got together very young. They've been together like 25 years, almost 30 years. And years ago, one of them cheated, and then there was an affair. Now, I was not the person who helped them through that because they went through help with that beforehand. But I was asking them, how did you overcome that? They were just discussing that. Well, she said we had a couples therapist who I absolutely hated, but he was the best thing that's ever happened to us. She hated him. She's like, basically like every time we had to go to couples therapy, she's like, I had to like mentally and emotionally and physically prepare myself for battle because he would not take any shit from either one of them. Wow. And he was really hard on them to look at their own stuff and to see how they create, like, of course, his affair, he had to atone for that and apologize for that and all of that. But if they were going to make it through to the other side, she had to see how she was part of what was not working in the marriage. And they have a beautiful relationship now. And that would have torn apart, most people, most couples. So I share this story because if we're not willing to really examine our relationship with ourselves and our personal patterns, nothing's changing. So it really does begin with our relationship with ourselves first and foremost. And that's what inspired me.
I love that. What a great anecdote. You said so many things that I want to just quickly highlight. One is this idea of responsibility, because you said this in a way that sort of made me giggle, but your breakup, which was the breakup that led to all the things, which I want to get to why you said it like that, but I sort of know, I think. But what I love is during my breakup, which is also the breakup that led to all of my things, and I'm saying it because I feel the same way. I feel like I've told this story so many times, and I've sort of referenced this so many times, was dealing with the responsibility, because there is something incredibly powerless about going, fuck the other person, they did this, they did that, And there's something when you can finally get there, and it takes a minute, it takes some time to get there. But once you do, there's something incredibly powerful about going, what do I own? And how do I own it? I love that you said that, because I think it's really important for people to understand that, you know, something can or cannot be their fault, but ultimately it's their responsibility to pick up the pieces. That this woman talked about how much she hated couples therapy, because I think there's a little bit of a misconception out there around what a good experience in couples therapy is. And oftentimes I think the misconception starts and ends with, well, we broke up, so obviously it wasn't that good. And I did couples therapy with my, you know, big relationship, game-changing partner, and it didn't work. And at first I was really mad at my couples therapist. And then I realized, oh no, he actually did exactly what he was meant to do. We were not supposed to be together. Couples therapy worked. And so I'd love to get your view on this societal norm construct of success or failure being determined by, you know, whether you are staying in a relationship or not in a relationship.
So first, I do want to say that I do think that there are couples who could make it if they had the right help. And I think that there's some people who don't get the right help. So I just want to kind of throw that out there.
Good call out.
But for sure, you know, but then the other side of the equation is I don't look back at my marriage and think, you know, God, I wish that had worked out. Not even once. I'm like, thank God that didn't work out. So, you know, chalk that up to everything happens for a reason or whatever it is. A relationship, there's so many different types of romantic relationships, and not all of them are meant to be these long-lived life stories. Some are just meant to be affairs. Some are just meant to be, an adventure. Some are, you know, some people come into our lives to just wake us up from whatever trance we're in. I think that just because a relationship ends, it doesn't mean it was a failure. That's what you're asking, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that's just not true. I think that what causes us a lot of pain is when we try to make a connection with someone into a relationship when really it was just meant to be an affair. You know, and I'm not talking about an infidelity affair. I'm talking about like a romance. So, some people, lots of people experienced relationships during the pandemic that they got into because it was the pandemic and they needed someone, they connected with someone, and it was to kill, to prevent loneliness from taking over. But deep down, they knew that maybe if there was no pandemic, they would have never actually been with that person. That's okay. I mean, we can choose to be in a relationship for many different reasons. And just because, and look, sometimes someone, when we start seeing them, is absolutely the right person for us. And a few years later, they end up being not the right person for us. But now, does that mean that we chose wrong? Does that mean that the relationship was a failure? No, it means that you chose well at the time. And then because of life circumstances, because of just maybe you both grew in different directions, it just was, you chose well and you chose well. And that was a relationship that worked really well for a season, but it wasn't actually meant to be long-term. So just because a relationship ends, I don't see it as a failure. I think that some people can get very, it's really important, as I was saying, in the processing of a breakup, that as much as you take responsibility and see your role, you also have to be able to see their role. Because sometimes we don't see the other person very clearly. So the whole point of processing a breakup, which can take a really long time, is to be able to see yourself clearly and able to see them clearly, see their role and see your own role. And I think that some people in their processing will have this moment of like, wow, I really messed this up. And it's very possible that someone really messed it up. And so they feel like they really failed the other person and they failed at this. And that might actually be true, but there's still a lesson. There's still a lesson to be learned. You know, we won't go through life having not hurt other people. You know, and we can think that we are, you know, very responsible and, you know, emotionally sophisticated in relationships. But there's definitely someone after a certain age, I would guarantee everyone has someone out there in the world who, when they think of them, they're like, wow, that person really screwed me over.
Yeah. Yeah.
Or that person really hurt me.
Which is hard, which is super hard.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No. So I was, that's really just it. You know, I mean, some relationships are just have an expiration date. All relationships have an expiration date because even if you do last with someone for the remaining of your lives, you're going to die.
Yeah.
Your partner might die first. You might die first. So everything has an expiration date. I think that the problem that so many people are trying to solve in their lives is, how do I make a relationship actually last and work?
Right.
Because people don't want to, you know, it's very painful to have a great relationship turn sour. That's a very hard thing to process. Like this, we were so great the first year and then everything fell apart. And in the processing of that, it's like, okay, well, why did it fall apart? That's the great question. Why did it fall apart? And then it's like, there begins the journey of why it fell apart. And you're going to feel a lot of shame and you're going to blame. And your heart's going to break because you're going to feel inadequate. Your heart's going to break because you're going to feel totally victimized by the other person. And when we get to the other side of the hell that is processing a really big breakup, when we get to the other side, what we are left with is, clarity. I see what I did. This was my pattern. I see what they did. I'm determined to not let that happen again. I can't control my future, you know, in terms, I can't control another person, but I can really do my best to see that whatever just happened in this past relationship that made the first year great and then it totally turned sour, I'm determined to not repeat that pattern again.
So, I mean, I love all of what you just said. There's two questions I have though. So if I'm somebody who is in a relational ending right now, going through a breakup, I guess my first question is, how do I not see this as a failure? Or should I see it as a failure? Is there a period of time where I should go, okay, this failed? Like, what do you say to people who are in that moment, who are trying to see maybe the optimistic side or the light or not beat themselves up?
I really believe that life becomes a lot easier and a lot more pleasant when we replace the word failure with lesson. And so I don't think that if it didn't work, you know, I mean, it's complicated. It's like, I think you have to see, again, if someone is going through a breakup, you have to see it as you have a lot to learn. The more pain, the bigger the lesson. So I think that everyone has to just replace failure with, I have a lot to learn here. I have a blind spot here. Or it would be so much better if people can just look at it and be like, okay, we did our best. We were meant to learn a lot from each other. We were meant to be a mirror for each other. And we weren't actually meant to last. What did I learn from this? That's the ideal. But the thing is that, you know, it's all an emotional pattern. So some people have that pattern where they get so hard on themselves. And so everything is about, I failed, I messed up. And so they just use the breakup as an excuse to beat themselves up. But they're not just doing that with the breakup. That's a pattern that you can probably see in most areas of their life. So, that's why I kind of push the lesson thing, because no one wants to hear. I'm not going to tell someone who is just in the first stages of grief of a breakup, like, there's a lesson here. That's not what someone wants to hear. What they need in that moment is understanding, and they need someone on their side, and they need someone to validate them when they're in pain. When they get more to the place where they can process, where they're not just so overrun with, you know, intense grief, that's when we can start to talk about what they possibly learned from this, and to not use the ending of the relationship as yet another excuse for them to beat themselves up.
Because people are addicted. I mean, to use a word, or get off on those kinds of emotions, right? I mean, I know people who just love being in the wallow of it. And that can be a healthy place to be for a little bit, to sit there. And, you know, there's some people who never want to be there and are super uncomfortable in the tricky, tough spots. And then there are people who really milk it. And I
don't know if I don't think it's that they're milking it. I think that it's that they get stuck in a story, and they get stuck in one particular aspect of the story, and they get stuck emotionally. And the purpose would be with that person is to help them get unstuck. But yes, there are definitely people who tend to get stuck in certain emotions sort of across the board. But again, I don't think they're trying to milk it necessarily as, they just don't know any other. It's just they don't know any other way.
Right. Maybe a bad term of phrase, but I also know people who I think there is a part of being in that pain. Come with me here on this journey. I'm going to try to bring this back full circle. I think there is a part of the pain that can make people feel very seen in a way in their life that maybe otherwise they hadn't. And
well, that's the victim mentality. That's why, look, life is hard, and to sometimes feel like a victim, even when you haven't actually been victimized by someone in an abusive way. But I think that all of us are susceptible to being seduced by feeling like a victim sometimes.
Yeah. Yes.
There's definitely benefits to it. Yeah, I'm going with you on this journey. There's definitely benefits to it. I mean, there are certain people who get a lot of attention for always having a problem. And people get very addicted to their problems. We get very addicted to our problems. And if there's one problem that we've had that we've unconsciously gotten used to getting a lot of attention for, that's just going to reinforce our addiction to that problem. So I think that might, and you can definitely see that in breakups for sure. And it can also, the thing is, I mean, emotions are interesting. If you're really, if someone is having a hard time moving forward from a breakup, sometimes that grieving process that is lasting an unusually long time, an uncommonly long time, is a pattern that is keeping the person stuck in what is familiar, right? Because to get out of that grief, they would actually have to make pretty significant changes in their life.
Yeah.
And that's overwhelming to them. So they stay in that grieving because it's the distraction from what it is that they actually know on a deeper level that they have to take on in life, that they're too afraid to take on.
Oof, wow. Okay. That is real. I want to switch gears a little bit and go back to your story in the way that we both sort of mirrored each other's, the big breakup. And maybe it's not this, but one of the things that I love about you and your work, and this is sort of, I think, core to the ethos of Felt, is that we're not teaching from a lab or from the textbook. We're teaching from lived experience. And there may be lab and textbook there too to support, our own journey, but you do a remarkable job and an incredibly generous job at sharing your story with people and from speaking from a place of,
thank you.
Hey, I've been there. And so I'd love to know, whether it's your divorce or something else, what is that sort of defining relationship for you that really did catalyze, looking back, like your journey into this work, your life, bettering your relationships?
Oh, I mean, that defining relationship was my marriage for sure. But I think that, what happens is that when you go through a breakup, the breakup that is the one, we refer to it as the breakup. We call it the breakup because it's the breakup that that forces you to look at all your past relationships, right? It kind of takes you down memory lane.
Mm-hmm.
And so I've had a lot of relationships, and the defining one, that was my marriage, because I had a blueprint that said, I'm not going to get divorced. So I had a lot.
Who gave you that blueprint?
It was a blueprint that came about from, my parents were divorced and I didn't want to be another statistic. I didn't want to get divorced. I didn't want to be someone who was divorced. I mean, there's a lot of stigma attached to that in this culture. I don't think in certain cultures, I don't think it's in all cultures, but certainly in US culture, there's a large stigma attached to being divorced. There's a large stigma attached to women of a certain age being divorced that men don't seem to have to carry. So it was a lot. And I just was very unclear. I didn't understand what really went wrong. How could something so right turn out so bad? But again, you just look back and you say, oh, these were some certain flags that I missed. I always say that our relationship before we got married was 90% on point and 10% problematic. But the 10% was actually very significant. And that when we got married, the 10% became the 90%. And what was the 90% became the 10%. So I think that if a relationship sort of crashes and burns and really just falls apart, there's always signs in the beginning that we justify away and, or we think, oh, it's no big deal, because a lot of us are not taught we're not taught, you know, you shouldn't actually, like, this isn't okay, you know, like this you shouldn't actually tolerate, or this you should, we're not taught how to assert ourselves in relationships. So, you know, I did the best that I could, but that, you know, I think it was the time, what made it, that relationship so defining for me was very much related to the stage of life I was in. So I was in a stage of life where I wanted to have children. I was a stage of life where I didn't want to be single anymore. I was in a stage of life where I really wanted to nest and build a family, you know, and so when that relationship ends, what we're confronted with is a blueprint that literally gets burnt, right? Like it burned. It's just, we are all of a sudden faced with a future that we did not prepare for, that we didn't want. And then when that happens in our life, whether it's a breakup or something else, we feel incredibly, that's when we suffer the most. It's when we have to go back to the drawing board of redesigning a future that feels compelling enough for us to feel happy about the future, feel excited about the future. But when things don't turn out, when things gravely do not turn out the way that we had planned them to, and we don't have a plan B, it's incredibly disorienting. And I think that that's a lot of what people psychologically and emotionally face after a really big breakup is there is no plan B. I don't know what my future looks like. I know that this is, you know, I never planned for this. This is not what I was looking forward to. And then people feel deeply devastated and traumatized, not just because they're losing the person, but they're losing what they imagined their future would be. And when we cannot imagine our future, or if we can't see our future as compelling, that's when we get depressed.
I'm curious if you feel comfortable, you know, and I've always struggled with navigating some of this in my own retelling, you know, as I'm not really a public person anymore in the same way I used to be when I was an actor, but you are a public person and you are sharing your story. And, you know, I'm curious how you balance like what you feel comfortable disclosing and how that honors the person you're, you know, maybe talking about the relationship with. But you mentioned this 10% at the start that, you know, you kind of are like, we'll figure that out. And there being some red flags. And I'm curious, in your own experience of the relationship, what were those?
Sure. Well, I'll share one that I've shared, you know, I share a lot, but obviously I don't share everything. But I'll share something that I've shared before in other podcasts. We had we had a date to go to this live show called Sleep No More. I don't know if you're familiar with it, but it's really cool. People can look it up. And we were about 6 or 7 months into our relationship, and things were mostly bliss. But I mean, I'm trying to remember. I mean, it was, you know, a while ago, and this doesn't live inside me anymore. So we were in a car service from Brooklyn to Manhattan to go see this event, and he was being really quiet and distant. Now that historically is like kryptonite for me, because that's my father, you know, like trying to figure out his moods, someone being distant, and then you ask them what's wrong and they say nothing, but clearly something is wrong. And all I could think is that, you know, it was me, and I started to panic and feel really uncomfortable. And then during Sleep No More, they give you these masks so that everyone is sort of anonymous. And even if you come with a date, they separate you. So everyone's wearing the exact same mask. And everyone is just like, you're on your own trip. Like you could have come with like your kid. You're going to be separated. Like you wouldn't have gone with your kid. You wouldn't have gone with your kid because you have to be over 18, but you could have gone with your adult child and they'd be like, no, sorry. Like you're not, everyone is separated.
Right.
They do that on purpose. But even though everyone's wearing a mask, you know what your partner's body looks like. You know what they're wearing, right? So everyone's wearing masks, and every so often we would kind of run into each other, and you would see couples when they would run into each other, they'd do like a high five or a quick hug, and then they would keep moving or they would stay together, you know, and like do it together, or they would just be like, yeah, clearly this is supposed to be sort of a separate experience. So let's give a quick hug and we'll keep going. Right. I would know that he would see me, but he would pretend like he didn't. He was like totally kind of stonewalling me. So anyway, long story short, if that were to happen today, so I ended up saying nothing. I just waited until it was a very uncomfortable night. I felt very tense all night. I felt very anxious all night. And then I just kind of waited until his mood blew over. And then when he, I guess, was loving me again, then it's like my whole physiology let out a sigh of relief. Oh, I'm loved again. We're okay. Typical, like avoidant, anxious thing. What changed today? How that would look different today is I would just say, what's up? Right. Like you're acting strange. Like what is up? And if there was no if he refused to communicate about it, and if all that had happened, I would have just said that felt terrible. And I don't know what is going on with you. And maybe you need a day to figure out what's going on with you. And that's fine. I'll give you that space to figure it out. But I don't like how that felt. And so I'm not really sure if this is the right relationship. So why don't we take a day off? You figure yourself out and then we can talk about it. And then I don't know, today I would probably break up with the person. Actually, I would. I actually would 100%.
Wow.
But I would first have that conversation. Back then it was just more about the anxiety. So I share that because that was a really big red flag. That was the insight into what was going to become the ethos of our relationship, was him being avoidant and me sort of being anxious. But the reality is that there was just a lack. We weren't sophisticated enough emotionally, and we weren't skilled enough technically to have a difficult conversation, a conversation where it could have been somewhat confrontational to really figure this out. And it may have led to a breakup anyway, but there's just at this stage of my life, like that's just like kind of, I think of that as like teenage behavior. Right. I just so would never, ever be in a relationship with someone who lacked the skills so deeply that they would have to pull away in that way and like pretend like if you're going to be in a relationship with me and you're ever going to pretend that I don't exist, you better be doing that to save my life. And if it's not a life-saving situation, you're going to pretend like I don't exist. Well, guess what? You don't exist. I will break up with you on the spot. I mean, that's ridiculous. Who would tolerate that? I would in the past. Many people would. I don't think they should. But I shared this also because never going to work to make someone have a conversation with you right off the bat. I notice how I said, take a day to figure yourself out and then come back to me. Right. I give that space, but that's it. That's the story.
You heard it here, folks. If you are in a relationship with Jillian Turecki and you ignore her, it better be saving her life.
It's not ignore her pretend I don't exist.
Yes.
Because you could be ignoring me because you are unintentionally, because you're in the middle of some really important work thing. And you know, there's a lot of context there. But if you're in a situation, you're literally pretending like I don't exist. You're in that kind of deep avoidance. I mean, like, are you kidding?
No, it is
kidding.
You know, it is crazy to look at, if you do the work, if you can exit a relationship and commit to doing the work and looking at yourself, your ability to pattern recognize
increases a lot.
Exponentially better. And, you know, I'm somebody who's struggled in my life with self-control at times, not in any sort of egregious way, but, you know, I grew up in an age of immediate gratification. You know, I struggled with, and, you know, I had a lot of shit about my looks and my height and losing my hair really young. And so there was a lot of external seeking that I had to do. And my dad, who our relationships come such a long way, he actually hates when I talk about him on podcasts, but I think he'll do it anyway. Well, because I think we both share this, and we've both shared this with each other, which is that we're both people who needed a lot of that in our life, external validation. So I grew up sort of seeing that in my life. And so dating, whether they were right or wrong, I just constantly wanted the validation. And so I was like some of what you were speaking of earlier, which is I was willing to, you know, look the other way on certain things because there was this part of me that really needed this validation to feel.
You were insecure. I mean, That's really what it is. Just insecure.
And as soon as I started to look at myself and to start taking responsibility, the pattern sorting wasn't even an option anymore. It wasn't even something that I could consciously continue moving for, as much as maybe it was validating me. And as much as there were still pieces of me that were insecure and are insecure, it was so strong saying, no. You don't do this anymore. You don't stand for this anymore. You don't look for this anymore. And so, I mean, I love what you're saying, because I think, you know, that is the invitation here, right? That's the silver lining, is that these relationships are incredible teachers if we let them be. And especially the endings, you know, are these incredibly fertile moments for a lot of us. And I really appreciate you sharing your story and that example, which in some ways is so subtle and in other ways is so overwhelming.
Yeah, it might seem like not much, but it was very, very, very significant. And it's significant enough that it's the story that I tell, you know, many years later, because I do think it was sort of the fork in the road. Like I could have gone A or B, and I went B, and this is where it led me. Yeah.
You talk about dating, you talk about relationship to self, you talk about breakups, right? Like a lot of these things involving our romantic relationships. And you've been talking about this stuff for a while. What are you really intrigued by, excited about, lit up right now in your work in this space? It can be about relationships, could be about UFOs. But I
think right now, yeah, I know, because it kind of, it changes, and I mean, all of it kind of lights me up, to be honest. But right now I'm going through a phase where I'm really enjoying helping people who've had not great success in relationships find really good success in relationships, find their right person, whatever that means to them. I've really been enjoying taking someone who is single and maybe, they're dealing with a lot of stuff, and then learning how to really be in a high functioning relationship for the first time, from how they choose the person. Cause I've had the pleasure and the privilege of working with people when they're single and then get into like their first really healthy relationship, and then helping them navigate that so that they don't screw it up. Right. And then now, a lot of them are engaged, and it's really lovely. So I really have been enjoying that, is helping people who are just really lost when it comes to finding someone who's right for them, and helping them to get to the process of, dating better, weeding out people who are not right for them better, and just finding someone who's more well matched. And it's definitely not easy, because a lot of people will say that they want a certain type of person, but they're choosing the exact opposite, right? They say they want the conscious person. They say they want the available person. They say they want this, but lo and behold, they're choosing the exact opposite. So it's a challenge to help people break those patterns within themselves. But so I've been really enjoying that a lot.
And what is that? What does that process look like? Obviously I don't need any trade secrets, being spilled here, but let's say I'm a person who's like, okay, hey, fuck it. I'm done with my patterns, and I'm done calling in the wrong types of people, and I'm ready for like the real deal.
Yeah. So that's great. First, I want them to understand what their patterns are. What are the stories that they have about who they are in relationship? I want to know what they associate with the word love. I want to know how they were taught to love growing up. I want to know if they date men, I want to know what their beliefs are about men. If they date women, I want to know what their beliefs are about women, because one of the most common internal conflicts I see, like let's say, for example, women who date men, is they want to be in a relationship so badly. They're longing for it, but they hate men. They don't trust men. So that's you're not going to get that relationship you want as long as you think that all men are blank, right? So I help them first navigate their patterns and their beliefs, and then I help them get very clear on what it is that they want based on their value system, based on their value system and how they want, and the kind of relationship that they want to have. And it's really about bridging the gap between, because the whole idea is that you want to be physically and sexually attracted to someone who's actually good for you. And not just be physically and sexually, which I guess is the same thing, physically, sexually, but physically attracted to those who are not good for you.
Right.
And so it's sort of realigning your picker, so to speak.
I have been there. I have been there in how fun it is to chase after the unavailable people, and how exciting and dopamine inducing that is. I will say, as some of my own experience, I've been talking about this a lot recently. It's just understanding how much dopamine plays into so much of these instincts that we have. And by limiting some of our, external constant espresso shots of dopamine, that can even help to reframe some of how you show up. I know social media, like deleting my Instagram. I feel like I'm on a little bit of a soapbox about that recently, but just the app, Not even getting rid of my Instagram. I still check it from time to time, but just deleting the app, and how much it improved my relationship with my current partner. I wasn't constantly looking at what was unavailable to me that I wanted. Anyways, I think even that plays into, into this space. So these are my last kind of two questions for you. And then we have a question from the audience every week. We put out an ask, and we pick one person, and they record a voicemail for you, old school.
Oh, cool.
We're gonna get to that in a sec. But before we do, where can people find tools from you, or opportunities with you, currently, and maybe even more specifically to help with finding that person?
Yeah. So all that, I'll be coming out with a lot more content for that. But for now, I would say if you're a woman, they should really join my membership, The Conscious Woman, because in it's all this personal development stuff. And there's a whole like little mini workshop on if you're single. If you're not a woman, you can certainly get my singles blueprint. No problem. Just can't be part of the membership because it's supposed to be a safe space for women. And so, yeah, I mean, I'm currently doing a group coaching program for people, who want to find the one, but that's a 7-week program. I might do it again, in the fall, but everything, I announce everything on my Instagram at Jillian Turecki, and for free, my podcast, Jillian on Love. So I put content in there for singles, for people who are in relationships, people who are heartbroken. So if you're single and you're trying to figure out like who's the right person, listen, I have a couple episodes on Jillian on Love, and you can listen to that for free. The podcast is so good. And it is, it's almost highway robbery that it's free. Because it is so comprehensive and so thorough, and you do such a good job. You're such a beautiful writer, and you do such a great job at taking really complex, big challenges, ideas, and boiling them down and distilling them into very succinct ideas. So I cannot recommend your podcast enough. My last question is, if someone today is saying, all right, I'm going to listen to the podcast, and I'm going to, download the blueprint, I'm going to join the, membership, but what can I do right now? Like how can I start right now? If they're single? If they're single. Oh, I mean, so stop hunting for love. Stop the hunt. And, if you're like on the dating apps and it's exhausting you, get off the apps. Do it the old fashioned way. Go have fun. Go forget about love for a minute and actually do some things with your life that's fun. Make your life something that's interesting so that you can bring some of that interesting stuff to a relationship. Go take yourself to your favorite restaurant and sit at the bar and eat dinner alone and see what happens and see who you meet. Go to an event with like-minded people. Go to it. If you want a man, go to an event where there's going to be lots of men. If you want a woman, go to an event where there's going to be lots of women. So start with that. This whole obsession in the dating apps and everyone's exhausted and this and that. The dating apps is a fairly new phenomenon. Get off the apps. Do it the old fashioned way. Like get a little patient. Stop hunting for love. Stop going on 1 million dates a week and take a step back and evaluate if you're actually living your life or if the whole dating thing has become an obsession for you. Because if it has, it's not going to work. Don't hunt for love. Make yourself, open yourself to the possibility of love. Put yourself in situations where your mind can expand, where you can meet new people, where your network can expand. Start doing more of those things. That's what I would say. I love that.
I love that. And I totally agree. I mean, for me, there is nothing sexier than somebody who is in their flow and is doing things in their life that fill them up, and that love is a part. It can be an important part, but is a part of who they are. And they're not looking for it to be the thing that makes them who they are. I totally agree. Okay. We have one thing really left to do here, which is to play you a voicemail from...
Exciting.
I love calling it a voicemail.
I know, this is exciting.
From our audience, just for you. So I am going to share this with you now. Let me know if you can hear this.
Hi, Jillian. I wanted to ask you a question. I am, or have been doing a lot of work and a lot of healing and processing after a pretty traumatic breakup. And I am pretty clear about what I want in a partner and in a relationship. And it's pretty deep. It's not superficial stuff like height and things like that. However, I am still coming from a kind of in this space where I feel like maybe all the good ones are taken. What I'm looking for doesn't really exist out there. I would love to know how to get past through that so that I can manifest the relationship that I truly would love to have.
Great question. Great question. Okay. So what I love about what she said is that she has an awareness, right? She's aware of the fact that she has this quote unquote scarcity mindset, and she's aware that it's a problem and interfering with what she believes is a manifestation, right? So she has that awareness, which is great. So just understanding that, like, that's what's standing in the way is, she's halfway there. What I have found to be very, very helpful is to spend time with people who are in good relationships. Now, that doesn't mean that their spouse or their partner is someone that you would want to date. They could be literally like, I would never date you, but your relationship is good. In other words, you work for each other. So she needs examples of two people who have found what they want in a partner. So she needs to be spending more time, and I would even be picking their brain sometimes if she's close enough with them, like, you know, how did you meet? How long did it take? Like, did you ever expect to find this person? Is your partner someone who you even thought that you wanted? Or did you have to change something in your thinking? So I did a lot of that. I did a lot of hanging out with people who are in good relationships. Again, they didn't necessarily have the relationship that I wanted, but they were happy. And that's the key difference. You don't have to hang out with people who have what you want. They do have what you want. They have a good relationship. That's all you need to know, is that they're happy with each other. And so hang around them, ask them a few questions, because oftentimes it comes in a package that we're not really imagining or expecting it. And through hanging out with people like that, even if you can't hang out with them as a couple, you hang out with someone who's genuinely really content in their relationship, instead of hanging out all the time with the people who are unhappy. And that's what I would do. It's very effective. And even if you only know one example, great. Spend more time with that person.
I love that. Jillian, I'm a huge fan of yours. As hopefully I've made clear. I think the work you're doing in the world and the way you're doing it is with vulnerability and grace. And it's such a beautiful thing to get to learn from you and chat with you. Instagram at Jillian Turecki, JillianTurecki.com, or your amazing podcast, Jillian on Love. Folks, I'm not kidding you. It has helped me navigate problems actively or challenges actively in my relationship. So thank you so much for being here. And I cannot wait to see what other work you put out into the world this next year as you continue to be a brain household name in my mind.
Oh, I really appreciate you and your words so much. It's very lovely. Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
Of course. Of course.